Today is a wake-up call for Washington Democrats.
In elections 6 months ago, voters sent the Democratic Party a message.
I think what it says is kind of slow down, take a breath.
The leadership took no notice.
Does it change the agenda for the House? No.
Now, as the midterm elections approach, Barack Obama's former advisor is predicting a pasting.
A loss of somewhere between 30 and 50 House seats. And that's pretty consistent with what the prognosticators are saying.
His former boss is putting on a brave face.
What do you tell Democrats worried about the midterms?
We got a story to tell, just got to tell it.
Except the story is the Democrats' misreading of the public's preoccupation with COVID-19. While the pandemic forced millions to rethink everything in their lives, their jobs, children, schools, where they live, the Democratic response was to throw money at it.
A lot of us expected a much more conservative administration.
In March 2021, Congress passed the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan without Republican support, adding to the trillions of COVID relief passed the previous year. A $1 trillion infrastructure bill arrived later that year.
The concurrent resolution, as amended, is agreed to.
And inflation was already biting hard.
Bottom line, you're paying more for just about everything.
Consumer prices in June were up by more than 5%. That's the fastest annual rate that we've seen since 2008.
This Democratic spend-a-thon was an exercise in political grandiosity wholly out of sync with a public that had turned inward. Even now, as the pandemic ebbs in an election year, people are either rebuilding their lives or restructuring careers.
I never would have thought someone like me would be standing at a state assembly.
That includes a growing movement of mothers calling themselves the midterm moms who were driven to politics over frustration about COVID protocols.
Parents and taxpayers should never, ever be in this position. We should never have to keep the school system in check like we've had to for 2 years.
The White House anointed Anthony Fauci and the Centers for Disease Control as arbiters of pandemic policy. 2 years later, the Biden CDC, supported by the Justice Department, wants to reinstate the mask mandate on public transport.
Public health decisions like this should be made by public health scientists, and CDC had made a decision that masks were useful, and it was deeply disappointing to see a federal judge step in and take that decision away from public health scientists.
Worse still, their appeal is about more than just this pandemic.
For current and future public health crises, we want to preserve that authority for the CDC to have in the future.
Joe Biden promised a return to normality, but that was about Donald Trump. There was nothing normal about the America over which Biden presided. He claims his economic recovery is unprecedented, but people know that the rebound came about as a result of the lockdowns ending. What Mr. Biden is responsible for is inflation, which coincided with Democratic spending.
It's my view that right about now we're entering a recession, and when that happens, and basically with this high inflation, the Fed tightens, then people get extremely wary of buying homes, and you see home prices collapse sometimes.
With Build Back Better, Democrats tried to create a once-and-for-all U.S. entitlement state. That failed, which is why progressives today push governance by executive order.
What you're hearing me say, first of all, is that not everything has to go through Congress. We picked the example of student loan debt. That would affect about 43 million people.
Just months from Election Day, Democrats' failure to attract voters has nothing to do with their unheard message and everything to do with their story.